As the U.S., led by President Trump, abruptly ended trade talks with India, the diplomatic landscape shifted overnight. The sudden halt left India facing not just economic uncertainty, but also a test of its global standing and strategic options. Prime Minister Modi made a bold move. He turned to Russia and President Putin, seeking to strengthen a partnership that has stood the test of time. The timing was no accident. Modi's outreach was carefully planned, signaling India's readiness to act swiftly in the face of adversity. Modi's visit to Moscow, just days after the U.S. imposed harsh tariffs, sent a clear message: India won't be cornered or dictated to by any one power. For decades, India has balanced relationships with rival superpowers, walking a diplomatic tightrope between Washington and Moscow. Now that balancing act is being tested like never before, as global alliances shift and new challenges emerge on the world stage. The U.S. tariffs were more than an economic blow, they were a political insult, threatening the foundation of the U.S.-India partnership and raising questions about trust and reliability. Modi's pivot to Russia is a calculated response, reinforcing ties with a reliable ally and signaling India's commitment to strategic autonomy and independent decision-making. The imagery of Modi and Putin together contrasted sharply with Washington's cold shoulder, highlighting India's resolve to chart its own course and not be swayed by external pressures. Energy security and defense needs are at the heart of this realignment. Russia remains a key supplier of military hardware and energy resources, both vital for India's growth and security. India is prioritizing its own interests, even if it means friction with the West. The country is determined to protect its sovereignty and economic future. As the U.S. adopts a more transactional approach, focusing on short-term gains over long-term partnerships, India is diversifying its alliances, refusing to rely solely on any one partner, and building bridges with nations across the globe. This is not just about trade or oil, it's about India asserting its independence in a shifting global order, and shaping its own destiny as a major world power. Modi's message is clear: India values its Western partnerships, and recognizes the importance of cooperation with the U.S. and Europe. But it won't abandon old friends or its own interests under pressure. In this new era, India is determined to stand tall, make its own choices, and ensure its voice is heard on the world stage. The U.S.-India diplomatic chill began with tariffs, taxes on imported goods meant to protect domestic industries. In August 2025, President Trump slapped a 25% tariff on all Indian exports, then doubled it days later, citing India's oil trade with Russia. The penalties hit Indian businesses hard, threatening billions in trade and upending years of diplomatic progress. Trump's rhetoric escalated, even calling India's economy dead, a public insult that deepened the rift. India, shocked and indignant, called the tariffs unfair but initially held out hope for diplomacy. The U.S. aimed to force India to cut ties with Russia, but the pressure backfired. India doubled down on its strategic autonomy. The aggressive tariffs revived old mistrust, showing how quickly partnerships can unravel when national interests collide. What began as a trade dispute became a political power play, pushing India to seek new alliances. The fallout has left both nations reassessing the future of their relationship. At the heart of the U.S.-India dispute is oil, India's economic lifeblood, powering everything from its industries to the daily lives of its people. The country's rapid development and growing population have only increased its hunger for energy. As the world's third-largest oil importer, India needs affordable, stable energy to fuel its growth and lift millions from poverty. Reliable access to energy is crucial for keeping factories running, lights on in homes, and transportation moving across the nation. When Western sanctions isolated Russia, India seized the chance to buy discounted Russian oil, cushioning its economy from global price shocks. This move allowed India to maintain economic momentum while much of the world faced rising fuel costs. Russian oil now makes up nearly 40% of India's imports, a dramatic shift driven by necessity, not politics. This transformation has helped India stabilize its energy market and keep prices manageable for its citizens. For India, this is about survival, keeping inflation in check and ensuring energy security for 1.4 billion people. Affordable fuel means lower costs for food, transportation, and daily essentials, directly impacting the quality of life. The government insists its priority is its citizens, not foreign pressure. Leaders argue that national interest must come first, especially when global markets are so unpredictable. Diversifying energy sources, especially away from the volatile Middle East, is a strategic move. India is also investing in renewables and natural gas to reduce its dependence on any single supplier. The U.S. sees these purchases as undermining sanctions, but India views them as essential for economic stability. For India, energy security is not just a policy, it's a necessity for national progress. This fundamental difference in perspective is fueling the current standoff. Both sides remain firm, with neither willing to compromise on what they see as core interests. For New Delhi, affordable energy outweighs diplomatic friction. The government is determined to shield its economy and people from external shocks, even if it means challenging powerful allies. The Russian oil deal is a pragmatic choice, not a political statement. For India, it's a matter of national resilience and ensuring a brighter, more secure future for its people. The U.S. sees India's Russian oil purchases as a direct blow to Western sanctions and a lifeline for the Kremlin. Washington's goal is to isolate Russia and cut off its war funding, so India's actions are viewed as breaking ranks with the West. The Trump administration tied new tariffs directly to India's oil trade with Russia, framing it as a betrayal of democratic unity. U.S. officials worry that if India defies sanctions, others will follow, weakening global pressure on Russia. For America, this is about maintaining the effectiveness of its foreign policy tools. India defends its choices as sovereign decisions. The U.S. sees them as aiding an adversary. Until these worldviews align, Russian oil will remain a major source of friction. Hopes for a landmark U.S.-India trade deal collapsed in 2025, exposing deep economic divides. The U.S. wanted India to open its agriculture and dairy markets, an impossible ask for a country where these sectors support millions. India offered concessions in other areas, including industrial goods and tech access, but the U.S. refused to budge on its core demands. The failure wasn't about one issue, but a clash of priorities: America's trade deficit versus India's rural livelihoods. The breakdown triggered a tariff war, erasing years of progress and goodwill. A successful deal could have strengthened both economies and their strategic alignment against China. Instead, the collapse left both sides frustrated and mistrustful. The episode highlights the challenge of reconciling the interests of a developed superpower and a complex developing nation. The deal that never was now stands as a symbol of missed opportunity. The fallout continues to shape the diplomatic drama today. Modi's foreign policy has long relied on balancing ties with the US, Russia, China, and Europe, a strategy of multi-alignment that has allowed India to maintain flexibility on the world stage. This approach has helped India pursue its own interests while avoiding being drawn too deeply into any single bloc. But recent global events and shifting alliances have tested this approach to its very limits, forcing India to make difficult choices and adapt quickly to new realities. First, border clashes with China shattered hopes of a stable relationship, pushing India closer to the US and its allies in search of security and support against an assertive neighbor. For a while, the US-India partnership flourished, with both sides seeking to deepen economic and strategic ties. But the tariff war with Trump has left India exposed and isolated, highlighting the unpredictability of relying too heavily on any one partner. Modi's personal diplomacy with world leaders has run up against hard national interests, as each country prioritizes its own agenda in an increasingly fragmented world. With ties to both China and the US strained, India is now pivoting back to Russia for security and support, reviving an old partnership that has stood the test of time. Russia remains a key supplier of military hardware and a steady partner, providing India with critical defense technology and diplomatic backing. But leaning on Moscow risks further alienating the West, especially as tensions rise over Russia's actions on the global stage and Western nations demand clearer alignments. Modi now faces one of the toughest foreign policy challenges of his tenure, preserving India's autonomy while navigating rival powers and managing competing expectations from all sides. The outcome of these choices will shape India's global role for years to come, influencing its economic growth, security, and diplomatic influence on the world stage. The balancing act has never been more precarious, and the world is watching to see which way India will lean. Despite political tensions, US-India cooperation endures in key areas. Space exploration is a standout. NASA and ISRO's joint NISAR satellite launch in 2025 showed deep scientific trust. The tech sector remains robust, with Silicon Valley and Indian IT hubs closely linked, driving innovation and economic growth. Defense ties persist, with joint exercises and intelligence sharing continuing even as India buys arms from Russia. These institutional and commercial links are resilient, often outlasting political storms. Analysts believe these ties could anchor the relationship and help restore trust. The partnership is multi-layered, not defined by any single dispute. These enduring connections may pave the way for future reconciliation. Modi's outreach to Putin signals India's commitment to strategic autonomy in a multipolar world. By deepening ties with Russia, India is diversifying its partnerships and refusing to be boxed in by any one superpower. This approach brings both opportunities: energy security, defense technology, and risks, like further straining U.S. ties. The U.S.-India relationship hangs in the balance, but shared interests, especially countering China, remain strong incentives for cooperation. Repairing the partnership will require compromise and a better understanding of each other's priorities. India is asserting itself as an independent power, determined to shape its own destiny. The choices made now will define India's global role for decades. Modi's diplomatic dance with Trump and Putin is setting the stage for India's future in the 21st century.